Alright, hello again everybody, welcome back. We're gonna be going ahead and continuing with I used to be a teacher and I worked in a tough neighborhood. So you guys already have an idea of what to expect from this story. We'll go ahead and do another 10-minute stint today. So, again, without further ado, get your favorite snack and get a drink, sit back, and enjoy. A white-hot stabbing pain in my left thigh cut through the dark. I sucked in a breath through suddenly unobstructed lungs and opened my eyes to find the world once again clear. My heart pounded and I looked frantically from left to right. A forest of table legs filled my vision along with the fading carpet of my classroom floor. And just above me I found a worn, lined face topped by a nest of dyed blonde hair. Seeing that I was okay, Thompson's expression settled from a look of deep concern back to its usual flat smile. She stood from her own crouched position and offered me a hand as she let an expended EpiPen clatter to the ground. "Thought we might have finally gotten rid of you, Rousseau." She hauled me to my feet with surprising strength. I wobbled a bit and Miss Thompson guided me back to my desk chair. My heart raced. "What?" The wizened old teacher cut me off. "Easy, big fella. Probably best you don't push it." I took her advice and collapsed into the peeling leather. I'd only had to use an EpiPen twice before, but neither time had the experience been pleasant. I found my heart pounding against my ribcage, my hands shook, and I hyperventilated just like I finished a death sprint. But I could breathe again. Slowly, my thoughts became clear and I looked over to Thompson, who had settled into a chair by my side and smiled. "I heard your fat ass falling across the hall. I've had enough allergy nerds to recognize a reaction when I see one." She picked up the EpiPen off the ground. "We had a little boy, Diego, who couldn't so much as smell a peanut last year, so we all kept these bad boys in our desks." "Oh, thanks, T," I managed through chattering teeth. "Well, I didn't want to have to hire someone new in the middle of the year. Those interviews are a pain in the ass." She patted my arm. "Let's get you home. I've had them get a sub for you tomorrow." I opened my mouth to protest, but Thompson set her jaw and raised her eyebrows. I swallowed in response. I could use a day off. I didn't mention the writing I'd found at the bottom of my drawer to anybody. If I did, I would have also had to admit that I'd gotten into a kid's face and cursed at him. And, well, I heard more than enough stories from the other teachers to know that just about everyone had been there with Jacob at some point. I didn't want to have to tell the whole story. So I let it go. And every morning I checked my bag for my EpiPen, and every afternoon I checked my lunch just to make sure it was packed up the way I'd bought it. But whenever Jacob snuck in comments like, "Damn, Rousseau, that's nuts," it got a bit harder to come to school. It was also difficult to see Laura and Jacob becoming increasingly inseparable. Her grades remained spotless, but her encouraging comments and helpful answers became less frequent, and then stopped entirely. Most disturbingly, however, she started to miss school every once in a while, and more than once she and Jacob missed school on the same day. So when mid-year parent conferences rolled around, I knew just what I'd say to Laura's mother, but I hadn't the faintest idea what to tell Jacob's. Fortunately, Thompson didn't have the same problem. "Ma'am, there's just a few things we'd like to discuss." In our first conference of the day, the old teacher fixed Jacob's mother with the same flat stare she used on everyone. The woman across from us had muddy brown hair, dyed blonde at the ends. Her eyes were green-tinged hazel, and they were ringed with dark, sleepless circles that I would have thought they were bruises, had I not seen their kind in the mirror for months. I'll get straight to the point. He hasn't completed one piece of schoolwork in weeks. Thompson finished speaking and let silence settle over the table. Jacob's mother didn't move. Notwithstanding her harried and exhausted features, the woman didn't quite look old enough to have a son Jacob's age. The The silence stretched on and the woman remained motionless, and what felt like an eternity. She blinked several times in rapid succession and then said, "I know something." She emphasized the final word and then let the sentence trail off. I stared confused. She knew something was wrong? She knew something that would help? Thompson soldiered on. "What do you mean, ma'am?" Jacob's mother blinked with a faraway look and then said again more meaningfully, as if she truly meant to finish the sentence this time, "I know something." Thompson raised her hand and then leaned back in the chair. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" Gone was the sympathetic smile, and Thompson now seemed more than a bit concerned. I'd been silent for the whole meeting. I didn't know how parent-teacher conferences typically went, and I thought it best to let Thompson take the lead. Jacob's mother just stared. Thompson took the other woman's hand in her own and gave a meaningful look and then said again, "Ma'am, is everything all right? The school has resources. We can help." I have to go." Jacob's mother scrambled and collected her belongings. Thompson stood and I followed her lead. "Ma'am, if there's something going on, if there's something we can do..." Jacob's mother stood and rushed out the door as the old teacher trailed off. I watched the young mother leave, and then from outside I heard a car start and tires squeal. The entire meeting had lasted no more than 3 minutes. But on her way out, I swear I could hear Jacob's mother muttering something. Thompson stood in the door with her hands on her hips. "I've been doing this a long time, Russo," she said, still not looking at me as she spoke. "But that has got to be some of the weirdest shit I ever saw." Just as the old woman finished, Green appeared in the doorway just past her. "Hey, y'all. Got some bad news." Thompson sighed in response and Green continued. "Laura's parents didn't show for their scheduled time, and they're not answering any calls. She hasn't been to school in a week." Thompson nodded as she spoke, seeming to convince herself. "We'll have to do a home visit." Struggling to read the street signs in the fading twilight, I pulled over as my cell phone lit up. I flipped it open to answer. "Green?" "Yeah, hey Russo," the man shouted, and I could hear the rushing of passing cars on the phone as he continued. "I just got a flat." But a roaring engine drowned out the rest of his sentence. "Shit, man, do you need me to come pick you up?" I deciphered "No! My wife," in response. "Alright, I think I'm a couple blocks away from Laura's. I'm gonna go drop by and let you know how it goes." I caught a few garbled words from the other end of the phone, and then another roaring engine before the call ended. I flipped my phone closed with a click and looked back to the MapQuest directions I printed out back at school. It took a minute, but I got my bearings. After a left, a right, and another left, I spotted the name of Laura's Street in the glow of my headlights. Short, one-level houses lined the road, many with windows broken or doors hanging from hinges. I scanned the passing doors for addresses before finally spotting Laura's in the dim glow of my headlights. I rolled to a stop in front of the house, my headlights extinguished when I cut the engine, casting the whole neighborhood into darkness. A ragged chain-link fence surrounded Laura's small lot, and children's toys laid strewn around the overgrown lawn. One window on the low ranch-style house was covered in plywood board, and no lights seemed to be on the inside. I approached slowly. Something smelled vaguely rotten, as if someone had left the garbage bag out in the yard for too long. I felt a pit form in my stomach as I raised a hand to knock. I rapped on the peeling door, but before I could raise my hand again, it swung open beneath my knuckles. "Hello?" I called through the gap. Nothing. I called again. Hello? This is Mr. Russo. I'm Laura's history teacher. This time I heard a hushed whisper, but I couldn't make out what the speaker had said. I leaned toward the crack in the door, but only found inky darkness on the other side. I pushed the door open a bit. Still, I could see nothing. But the stench, it grew stronger. Gripping the knob in one hand to keep the door from swinging all the way open, I rapped again, more forcefully this time. I could swear I heard another whisper, but again, no one answered. I should have just turned around. I should have just reported to Green and Thompson and Kelly that nobody was home. I should have called CPS to come check on Laura. I should have already realized I was already out of my depth. But instead, I pushed the door open and walked inside. The stench washed over me. A sickly sweet smell of rotting food mixed with mothballs hit me like a physical thing. I recoiled involuntarily. I blinked against the darkness and called out again. Hello? It's Mr. But as my eyes adjusted to the low light, the scene before stole words from my mouth. The door opened into a small family room with a kitchen just beyond. All the furniture in the space had been pushed haphazardly against the walls. A window to my right had been covered with a sheet. But enough light got through to illuminate the 4 bodies on the floor. My eyes darted around the macabre scene, taking in each new detail with deepening dread. Just in front of me were 2 corpses, several feet between them. One bowed low to the ground with knees drawn in and arms stretched all the way out. A kitchen knife stuck out, almost cartoonishly, from its back. The other corpse knelt on both legs, hands folded almost patiently in front. The bowing corpse looked to be that of a woman, with black hair streaming out in the front of her outstretched arms. The kneeling body was headless. Across the room were 2 more corpses, one splayed flat on its back and the other curled into a ball. The curled up corpse seemed smaller than the others, like a child. And with a sinking feeling, I recognized the one on its back. I recognized the muddy brown hair, dyed blonde at the ends. I recognized the hazel eyes and deep circles, the harried features, a bit too young to have an 8th grader. I recognized Jacob's mother. The door slammed shut behind me and the noise jolted me from the scene. I spun and grabbed the knob, but it wouldn't turn. My heart pounded against my ribs and I rattled the door. The stench caught up to me at the same time as the shock and the fear. I threw up in my mouth and bit on the somehow locked, unmoving door. I spun again, back to the scene and back to the bodies, through the small kitchen across the family room. I spotted another door with a cheap plastic shades covering a window. That's gotta lead outside. I jogged and tiptoed and danced all at once around the assembled bodies, desperate now to get outside, to be anywhere else but surrounded by the smell and the blood. I reached the door and thank God the knob turned. I slammed my shoulder into it and I pushed it open and stumbled through. The stench washed over me. A sickly sweet smell, rotting food mixed with mothballs hit me like a physical thing. I recoiled involuntarily. In front of me, on the ground, were the bodies, and bowing, one kneeled, curled up, and one flat. I'd walked again, somehow through the front door. The door slammed behind me, and the susurrus of whispered voices, like wind whipping through leaves, rose around me. Eyes rolling and chest heaving, I bounded again through the room and pulled my phone out of my pocket to dial 911. I gave the operators Laura's address as I bolted again through the house, past the kitchen and through a narrow hall to the left. I found another door and rattled the knob. But this one too was stuck. The whispers rose again behind me, and now a skittering pitter-patter joined the whipping wind sound. I didn't dare look behind me as I rattled the knob again, and finally it turned and I barreled through the door. And the stench washed over me. And I was once again back in the front room, bodies strewn around me. Tears streamed down my face and I spun to find the door once again shut. I gripped the knob into my free hand. Cell phone still connected to 911 on the other end, but no matter how hard I opened it, no matter how incessantly I jangled the knob, it wouldn't budge, and the door wouldn't open. I heard the voice through the phone tell me the police were almost there, and I heard the phone clatter to the ground as I looked down to find not a doorknob in my hand, but a knife plunged deep into the back of a bowing corpse in the front room. I heard the sound of my own body falling to the ground with a thud. I heard the front door crash open behind me, and I heard the police officer tell me not to move. I heard him telling me I was under arrest, and I could only sit and stare and allow myself to be hauled away. I was in jail for about a week before they let me go. The nonprofit quietly maintains a small team of lawyers, not to protect its teachers necessarily, but rather to make sure that the organization doesn't end up liable for their inevitable mistakes. So eventually, a square-jawed attorney with a suit and a briefcase marched into the station. And with his help, the police realized pretty quick that it couldn't have been me who killed Jacob's mother and Laura's family. That's who the other people in the house turned out to be. Laura's mother and father and sister. The bodies had been there for far too long, at least a week. And given how much time I spent at school, I had an alibi for just about every minute of about every day. So they didn't charge me with anything, and just as quickly as he'd marched in, the lawyer marched me out and told me I had a meeting with the nonprofit's regional leaders in a couple of days. He also gave me a letter from my school's principal. It said that I was fired, and uniform 12-point Times New Roman. It was a relief. When I got back to my apartment, I crawled immediately into my bed, and I barely left for 3 days. I kept all my doors open and terrified that if I turned the knob, I'd find myself back in that front room. I got up every few hours to use the bathroom or force food down my throat. I ignored my phone. I didn't so much as shower until 15 minutes before my Friday meeting. And even though I'd done nothing for nearly a week, I was still a half hour late. The regional board didn't mention the house. They didn't mention Laura's mother. They didn't even mention the school. Instead, they offered me a job. I wouldn't have to do much. They'd pay me a good salary and write me a glowing letter of recommendation for graduate school. They'd even explain my dismissal as a botched contract negotiation between the nonprofit and my school's charter management organization. And all I had to do was keep my mouth shut. So that's what I did. And when I finally listened to my messages, and I learned that neither Laura nor Jacob had ever turned up, I kept my mouth shut. When I got Amber Alerts for both of them, I just kept my mouth shut. And over the next year, as I clocked in and out of my job and went to therapy and slept, I kept my mouth shut. Not even in law school did I say a word. Not even to the incredible woman I met there did I mention Laura and Jacob. Until now. Because 10 years later, just when I thought the whole episode was finally behind me, I crossed paths with a young man. He had a pale pink port wine stained birthmark over one beady eye, thin, and shaped a bit like a leaf. And he had this smile on his face, like he knew a secret. And he hadn't aged a day. Alright, everybody, that is going to end the first creepy story that I narrate on this channel, at least the first legitimate series that I narrate on this channel. I hope it was something that you all enjoyed. There were a bunch of twists and turns that I didn't expect, and to be honest, kind of silly of me, I thought the NoSleep Reddit was actually full of real stories. Well, I was quite wrong on this, as you can tell. I do want to read some actual real creepy stories, but I'll find them and, well, read them in the future for your guys' entertainment. Anyways, it has been an absolute pleasure narrating this for all of you. I hope you enjoyed, as it was the first kind of big project that I've worked on for this channel. I'm always working to try to make things better, so if you have any thoughts or ideas on how I can do that, make sure to share them, and if you have any other stories that you want me to take a look at and narrate, I am more than willing to. I'm trying to get better at this whole thing. Anyways, everyone, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking your time out today to listen to this, and, well, you all drive safe, and I'll see you all, hopefully, in the next one.